Welcome to another episode of the Essential Craftsman Podcast. I'm Nate. Our discussion today is with Sam Holmes. Now, in 2019, in the spring, Sam sailed solo from California to Hawaii in a 23-foot boat, and he made a video of it and put it online, and he has since grown his channel and shared a lot more sailing content. And this is a conversation with him mostly about that trip to Hawaii, but also about sailing and this kind of adventure boat lifestyle. You'll get the message right away that I don't know very much about sailing, and so the questions and lots of the things I'm asking him are very basic, but hey, for me it's interesting, and I got to assume many of our listeners have not sailed much, and so I hope you enjoy it. I got to say for the record that I am just a huge fan of this guy. It is just inspiring to see someone accomplish a goal of this magnitude. And I certainly have thought, when I was younger, I thought I'm going to do that sometime. I imagined I would be able to make something like that happen. And I don't think I ever will, possibly, but it's not a small thing. And so to see someone who sets a goal like that and reaches out and accomplishes it with just not, I don't want to say basic tools or equipment, but if you watch the video, you'll see that Sam did this with very affordable and I would say everyman kind of gear, and just a absolute positive and inspiring attitude for something that's pretty serious and kind of scary. He just kind of has a confident smile on his face, and it's really cool. So you might pause this interview and watch that video and then come back to this. You might enjoy it a little bit more. We will link to it in the description, and I hope you check it out. And without any further ado, Sam Holmes of Sam Holmes Sailing. Thank you, first of all, very much for taking the time to chat with us. And I have given the audience a bit of the background, but I wouldn't mind hearing it right from the horse's mouth. Could you give everybody kind of an overview of how it is you came to be kind of a full-time sailor? I know you weren't born that way, but what have the last few years been like that led you to what you're doing right now?
Well, the big start of it was I sailed this little boat from Los Angeles to Hawaii. And to do that, I quit my job. And then once I got to Hawaii, I just kept going, and I spent 4 months sailing to all the islands. And I really decided it was like what I wanted to keep doing. So I've kind of moved up to a bigger boat, and I'm just kind of doing more of that. And I made a YouTube video, which is I kind of wanted to just document it for myself. But it kind of really took off. So it's kind of paying my expenses right now. So I've kind of continued doing the YouTube videos, and it's kind of growing the YouTube channel at the same time. It's been kind of interesting, and meeting people through those channels as well. So I'm doing the sailing videos right now.
So when you left and were filming that, you were just sort of filming it for your own kind of records and, I don't know, like personal history sort of. You weren't thinking about
like more like
a big audience
and like my family, and I didn't really think there was really money in YouTube, and I didn't have any desire for like YouTube fame or anything.
Yeah.
I've kind of since learned that even like a smaller channel can, get a little bit of pretty good income through it. But before I left, a friend's wife had kind of tried to get me to do some like audio diary for a podcast potentially, which I still haven't gotten into, but that kind of primed me, I think, for what I ended up doing to record the video over there. So I was doing kind of daily, just talking about what I saw and like how I felt, and I think that kind of maybe helped me to make the video a little better than it otherwise would have been. I feel like I've gotten a lot better since that one video, but there was kind of like a rawness that I think maybe people appealed to.
Yeah, it's like the true YouTube, where it's truly just a person, with their phone, just kind of sharing what they're doing. And there's a lot there's that stuff. There's less of that out there, it seems like, these days. And so, like you said, you maybe weren't programmed to be talking to a camera. Is that kind of something you've had to learn and practice? And if so, how's that gone? Because you don't seem like the type who's just like hungry to be, talking all the time, about yourself, and yet now you're making these videos, you kind of have to, right?
Yeah, I guess I've kind of found like a little bit of a formula that works for me. I mean, it's really simple. I'm just, pointing the camera at things and saying what I see. And to me, it's kind of hard to do because it's not interesting because it's the same thing I see every day when I go on a sail.
Oh,
But I think a lot of the feedback I've got is kind of has encouraged me to show more of the details, which I think other people have found interesting.
yeah.
Just like the day to day, what sailing is like across an ocean, or anchoring in different places. So yeah, so I'm just kind of saying what I'm doing and what I'm seeing, where I am, and trying to show some of the scenery and stuff like that.
So I want to talk about your Hawaii trip, because I don't know how you think about it now, but for most of us, that's like a huge kind of crazy feat that, very few people would even think about doing seriously. And maybe at one time you felt that way about it. How do you feel about it now? Does it seem like a big deal to do that in a little boat? Or now that you've sailed a lot more, is it kind of like, wasn't that big a deal? Or how do you feel about that trip now, looking back at it, maybe compare that to what it felt like when you were preparing for it?
I think it's like my biggest accomplishment I've done. I still feel like looking back at it, and leading up to it too. I wasn't sure if I was even going to make it. I did. I mean, I know people have done it in much smaller boats, and
When you say
way
make
much
it,
bigger.
do you mean like make it across the ocean, or like actually
I
start
thought
the
I might have
trip?
to turn around. I thought the boat might just get crushed by the wave. I didn't know what I was getting myself into completely. I had I was reasonably confident. I thought I could make it, but
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. And that's part of why it was an adventure in the first place, right? If you know it's something you can just do. It's like it's not
Yeah.
worth quitting your job for, and like making this big deal about it. So it was this kind of thing that you go out on day sails, or weekend sails, maybe even like a week long trip, and you just kind of like think about what if you just kept going, like to
Yeah.
I wanted to keep sailing and end up on a tropical island, like sailing up up the west coast or down to Mexico just didn't really inspire me as much as crossing like a part of an ocean and ending up in a tropical place like Hawaii. And
Yeah.
so that's what I decided to settle on. And it's a pretty established route. You go at a certain time of year and you can avoid hurricanes. So I had a pretty reasonable, like that for a trip that long, you can't get a weather forecast that will tell you what the wind
Right.
is going to be like, but you do know historically what the trade winds are going to do, and you shouldn't be going into an area really primed to have like build hurricanes or low pressure systems that would give you a lot of trouble. So I didn't know exactly what kind of weather I was facing, but I've had pretty good odds. I mean, that's a people do that. There's like races that go that way, and
Uh-huh.
getting back is the hard part. And I only sailed there, and I ended up selling the boat. I thought maybe when I got there, I maybe either sell the boat or try to sail up, around Alaska and then back down, or just keep on going.
Mm.
And ultimately, I decided that boat was just a little too small to keep going, which I wanted to do. So I decided to sell it and find a bigger boat.
Wow. What was it like with your family and even yourself setting out on an adventure like that? Like you said, you thought there was, and there probably was a possibility of disaster. were were you talking yourself out of it at any point, or were you pretty much like, maybe it takes a certain level of mental commitment to take it seriously? Or what was that like pushing off? Your video starts just kind of like bang, and obviously you put some prep before that moment, but what was that like?
Yeah, there was, I had bought the boat about 6 months before that, and I had to kind of in the back of the mind, maybe I wanted to do a trip like this. The boat when I bought it, it seemed like it was pretty solidly built, so it's such a small boat that it wasn't necessarily built for ocean passages. Just looking at it, I was like, this is a boat that I could do this kind of trip in potentially. But still, it was really not non-committal until the actual moment of like, I think maybe when I quit my job, I turned my 2 weeks notice. Maybe that was a couple weeks before,
Huh.
about it was a month before the trip. So I quit my job. I gave my 2 weeks notice, and then I think 2 weeks after that or something, I set sail. But before then, it was just like I was kind of like getting the boat ready, put solar panels on it. I purchased a self-steering gear, and I did a lot of, like shorter trips around the islands around Southern California, kind of leading up to it. And I felt pretty good. I did a lot of I was sailing, every week beforehand for months. So I felt really comfortable in that boat, and even
Yeah.
taking it out in some big swell. Because like once you get a certain distance from shore, you get in the same kind of you know ocean. Like you can't get back in a quickly, so you kind of have
Right.
to be able to just kind of tough it out,
Right.
ride it out until you can get back. So that's kind of what when you're further off in the ocean, right? You just have to be able to just ride it out, whatever you get into. And of course, I'm not sailing in the Southern Ocean or anything. I'm not getting into huge, 30-foot waves.
Huh.
Um, but it's the same kind of thing where you just have once you have there's a certain distance you get out, and you're just like, well, I guess I just have to deal with it. No one's going to come out and help with me within a reasonable
Yeah.
a short period of time. So that's kind of what you had to prepare
What's
for.
the difference? You said the Southern Ocean has big waves. The South Pacific, are waves bigger down there, or is it because of the season? It's like winter
Like
down
around
there.
like
Or?
Cape Horn, like where all the ocean racers go, they go.
Oh,
I mean, there it's basically like hurricane strength winds as often as it isn't around, just going around the
got it.
globe down there.
Got
Um,
it.
and that's where the real big stuff happens. The trade
Got it.
wind route would be more like going through the Panama Canal and Hawaii, and it's still you can still eventually get it. You'll eventually run into some bigger stuff, but not like down there.
Wow, that's really amazing. So, can you give a brief? I don't know anything about sailing, but maybe just a brief explanation of how your boat steers itself. Number one. Number two, I assume your boat is still sailing at nighttime and you're sleeping, and those kind of things are just hard for me to visualize. Being by yourself and your boat moving through the water, there could be, I don't know, another boat or who knows what in the water, and I guess you're just kind of have a level of trust that you won't find it, or how do all those things work? Do you have to recalibrate your course every morning just because it's not perfect steering, or can you explain some of that to a guy who knows nothing?
Yeah, so I get asked that a lot. Do I anchor at night? What do I do, when I'm sleeping? And so of course, in the ocean, it's too deep to anchor, and it wouldn't be you're wasting time where you could be sailing too, right? So I sail through the night if there's wind. My favorite way to have the boat self steer is called a wind vane self steering system, and so that it's basically completely mechanical. It doesn't use any electricity, and so the winds are pretty consistent offshore, maybe changing 10 degrees. And so the way that it works is that you set it to the angle of the wind, knowing that the wind's going to be consistent, and the boat will steer on that same angle of the wind, right? So if the wind
Huh.
did shift, 15 degrees, your boat course is going to shift 15 degrees. But in
Yeah.
the grand scheme of things, that's not too bad. I'd rather just have the boat,
Yeah.
change direction a little bit, and I'm just stay sleeping as long as you're out in the ocean. Of course,
Right.
if you're in a bay or something, that could mean you're going to run into land or some area you really don't want to go. But
Yeah.
that's a really great way because it doesn't use any electricity. It's very resilient. Like the stronger the wind, the stronger the steering forces are. It just uses
Wow.
like the speed of the boat moving through the water to steer it. And then in addition to that, when the winds get lighter, or if I am steering, closer to land, and I did like in the Chesapeake, I used electronic autopilot a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and that just steers to a magnetic compass course. It's there's like a little robotic arm kind of you just put on the tiller, and so that uses a little bit more. It uses battery power,
Mm-hmm.
but I kind of alternate between those depending on the conditions. If one of them is out of commission, I could use the other one. And as far as like watching out for other boats, there's like you, the common thing for solo sailors is to you every 10 or 10 between 10 and 20 minutes usually, kind of depending on how far you are away from things. You just wake up, pop your head around, and if you see any lights, then you have to kind of stay awake until you can be
Wow.
sure that you're going to clear them. And you can calculate how far you can travel in the amount of time you're going to be asleep, or how far a boat you could see a boat from the horizon that could potentially run into you. Now on my new boat, I have it's called an AIS system. So all the big boats, they're transmitting a signal, or they should be with their position, and I can receive that position and set an alarm that will tell me if I'm going to be on a collision course with one of those boats. I didn't have
Mm.
that at the time, and that won't protect you against every boat. Smaller boats aren't going to have that, but it does help.
Wow, that's really neat. Um, in terms of like arriving in Hawaii, for example, if I was driving, I know I could just drive into a city and find a place to park and all that. But I've really noticed and just kind of thought about, when you sail into Big Island or wherever, you've never been in those harbors before or know exactly where to park. And now you're on the East Coast doing that in all kinds of different places. And I always kind of scratch my head. And can you describe like the protocols of where you can safely park your boat and kind of get out and how that works? Does every harbor have like a number you call to have someone kind of tell you where to go, or is it a little bit like a free for all, or how does that work among like boaters? I'm sure it's very common, but I've never thought about it.
It varies a lot from where you are, like state to state, or even harbor to harbor. Like I think the general rule is you can anchor anywhere as long as you're not in a marked channel, like or it's prohibited. But there's some places like Hawaii where like all of the harbors are like your prohibited anchor unless unless you can do it for up to, I think there it's like 3 days or something, and then you have to get a permit, and then the permit only can last for so long. So when I got to Hawaii, I remembered I had to check in with the harbor master, and I got a permit for a few months to stay at the Big Island before I kept sailing on. But a lot of places, you can just anchor and no one will bother you. Some places they'll come out and harass you and say you need a permit or something. But I kind of like to just anchor and then ask for forgiveness later.
Yeah.
Usually, because usually they'll come out and let you know. Because I mean, a lot of the regulations aren't really well posted. Sometimes they're kind of hard to figure out. But yeah, sometimes they have a phone number or a radio frequency you can call. You just kind of figure it out as you go.
Wow. Yeah, and especially if it's nighttime and it's dark, or if it's really late, what are you gonna do? Who are you gonna call? Or I'm sure you kind of got to just take care of yourself a little bit, huh?
Yeah, the prudent thing to do is to kind of heave to offshore and wait until the daylight to come in. But usually I'm so tired, I just really want to be there, and I've kind of gotten pretty comfortable and like kind of judging if the anchorage is going to be approachable at night, and then just kind of try to find a open spot to anchor.
What are the people like that you've met? You've I assume run into a lot of other sailors and full-time boating types, and is there like a common thread among these types of people who are just traveling and experiencing this kind of adventure on a regular basis, or is it a real mixed bag? Or what have you found in terms of the people you are meeting?
Yeah, it's kind of mixed. I mean, there's a few young people. It's a lot of like older retired people, I guess, especially like on the inner coastal waterways of the East Coast. But even on the ocean stuff, there's probably not quite as many younger people doing it. It seems like, but yeah, then there's some people there's some people that have nothing at all. That just have a boat and their budget is zero. They'll just like work as they go, and it's pretty cool. Like you can do it. Like there's people on with huge budgets, huge boats, and they still think they don't have enough to do the certain passage. And there's people with nothing that have found a way to make their boat, to their, satisfaction of standard of safety. They think it's good enough. And sometimes it's better than these bigger boats. It's like it's what your priorities are, right? If you really just want to do this certain passage and do this certain type of cruising, a lot of the things that people think are necessary, you could just really say are luxuries, and you can just prioritize more, like what is really essential to get you across the ocean safely. And some of these luxury boats and boat makers, they don't prioritize the more like essential stuff, because most people don't sail them across oceans, right? They're just doing shorter things, and they kind of skimp on that kind of stuff. So there's kind of like a break in that kind of thing.
Have you had any type of like sailing mentor or somebody who you've really admired, or maybe you just met recently doing it the way you're kind of describing? That you always meet people like, let's say, like an athlete, someone who's you don't expect, like a common man who's just like so good at something, and you're like, wow, have you met people like that who are sort of really good at sailing or maneuvering or managing the oceans, who are maybe in rigs that are a little bit less, I don't know, fancy?
Oh yeah, I've definitely come across a few people like that. They're pretty inspiring, and just like trying to pick their brain for knowledge. And it makes me feel like, oh my God, like I've got like a huge budget compared to them, and I do think I'm doing it on pretty low budget,
Yeah.
But it's like, oh man, the things that other people have done, you know.
Like
It's
what kind of
just
things? Like, do you mean like accomplishments, like they've made it from this point to this point and that speaks for itself? Or maybe like
yeah.
the
Well,
actual
I
way their
met this
boat is set
guy. I'm
up?
trying to remember his name. I can't. It's escaping me. But he had sailed a small boat around the world, you know, and
Wow.
just like kind of seeing the way he lived and the experience he's had. They seemed like so much more richer than someone who had, you know, done it on a, you know, a big, you know, 50, 60 foot, you know, yacht, and he did it very, very cheaply.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. It's like kind of inspiring to see that happen, huh? Well, I think that's probably what most people how they feel when they look at certainly your Hawaii video, but even all of them because it's definitely it just looks more relatable than $1 million huge expensive boats that
Right. The
the
type of
common
boat I'm
person just
saying, like something
can't relate to.
someone, you know, middle class or even, you know, really wants to go all in and doesn't have a lot of money could buy a boat like this and, you
Yeah.
know, see themselves doing it, I think. And it's a boat you can learn on too. It's not like something you have to have grown up sailing and or gone through some type of, you know, special classes or thing
Yeah.
like that. I mean, I learned how to sail small dinghies um as a kid, and I didn't really sail much after that, and then I just bought a boat, maybe it was a 22-foot boat, so a foot shorter than the boat I sailed to Hawaii, and I
Yeah.
kind of taught myself the rest from there. And it's a size boat, you know, you can kind of manhandle around at the dock and stuff, so it's not like you really have to have everything dialed in if you're, you know, really, you know, doing it the right way and being careful, and you kind of teach yourself. It's great if you can get some mentorship or advice, but generally, like if you're trying to learn, people are willing to, you know, help you out too.
Is there any story or anecdote or something, maybe a mistake you made that you could share that you're kind of like, I don't know, looking back at it, you could see was a result of something you kind of had to learn and I don't know, maybe a close call or anything like that? Or have you been able to, you know, be a little more, I don't know, smart or safe or cautious in your approach? Or is it inevitable? Do close calls just like happen every once in a while if you're doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely made a lot of mistakes, and I can think about this one point. Like it was in Hawaii. There's a video on it. It was when I was in Molokai, and I just get in this situation, and I drop my anchor, and I get it like caught up in this boulder field, and I decided to go scuba dive down to save the anchor because I didn't have a backup. And oh man, like looking back on it, it was really just really sketchy to be doing that, like
Oh,
scuba diving solo at all. But in that,
oh,
like the sea state I was doing it in, is probably maybe not as good. But
oh,
it was quite an adventure though. I did end up saving the anchor and got the boat off. So I don't know if I really
oh.
regret it, but now I carry three anchors. So like if I do have to
Okay.
lose one, it's not the the end of the world.
Yeah, well, and you may think twice if you were to try that again sometime. You might think, yeah,
I'm
it's
much
not
more
worth it.
cautious about where I drop my anchor too, because I don't want to lose it. My big primary anchor at least is worth a
Yeah.
lot of.
What's it like being on a boat for a lot? And you know, over the last several months, but really all summer with COVID, you know, there's just so much. It feels like news and society is like there's so much going on, and I got to feel like when you are out to sea, you kind of become disconnected from that, and then tied back in. It has part of this do you feel like you kind of unhooked from a lot of that type of commotion, or is it just kind of no different? You're just, you know, commuting in a boat rather than a, you know, a car to work or something? Or it feels like I would imagine like I might feel disconnected from the rest of the society. Is that how it is, or not so bad?
Yeah, totally. I think I really avoided the whole COVID, well, a big portion of the COVID thing because I wasn't working. You know, I was
Yeah.
just prepping my boat at the beginning of it, and so I mean, that was affecting me a little bit. You know, just having to wear a mask and, um, but then yeah, once I started sailing, I guess I was going to go down to the Caribbean originally, so I had to change that plan.
Oh.
But then going up the East Coast, it wasn't really a big deal. Like I went through I took the boat through the Keys, and I'm pretty much able just to anchor and stay away from people and beaches and islands and stuff down there. And then going up the East Coast, I wasn't pulling into marinas really that because that's not really my style. Is trying to anchor out more. Um, and so I didn't really have a problem checking into places, and then just going ashore really for just supplies and groceries when I needed to. So it didn't really affect that trip. And when I got to Canada, I really did want to sail into Canada, but they weren't letting me in there. So that was another kind of a little bit of a bummer. Um, But no, I don't think it affected me like it did as much as it did other people. I think people like felt isolated at home, and that's just, I mean, that's the kind of thing that you maybe deal with if you're a solo sailor, like anyway, right? Just feeling like
Mm-hmm.
you've been on your boat for so long, you just really need to get out. But then I'm in a new place, so then I don't really have it as long. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't. Didn't have that kind of depression that I think a lot of people have had.
When Canada didn't let you in, like how do the mechanics of that work? Do you kind of radio across the border
I didn't
start
even
or what?
try. I could have gone in if I said I was trying to like transit to like a certain canal or something. I
Oh,
probably could have gone in, but it wasn't really supposed to. They have edit on their websites. You weren't allowed
oh,
to go in. But I had
wow.
a pretty good trip getting up to Maine, so I wasn't disappointed. There was some pretty cool like places with these really extreme tides and some arches
Oh,
and stuff I would have liked to see. It would have been pretty neat, but maybe another time.
wow. Yeah, that's really neat. Um, how did you get a skill set for all of the different types of repairs and maintenance that exist on a boat? Because I know your boat has I don't know if it's a diesel engine, but an engine. So there's mechanical
Hmm.
work and wood and fiberglass and aluminum. And it just seems kind of like a serious amount of skills that are required to maintain a boat. So how did you learn all that? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, I guess just by failing really badly on previous boats. It kind of looks like I know what I'm doing now, but I still don't.
Huh.
Um, like on my, my first boat that I owned, like these boats are not so expensive. I think I paid $750 for my 22-foot boat I started out in,
Is
and
that's the one you took to Hawaii?
no, it was the one that I kind of learned in, and then the
Oh,
next
okay.
boat I took to Hawaii. And so I just did so many things like projects on it because I wasn't gonna pay someone. Like a boat yard is gonna cost you, everything is
Yeah.
gonna cost you over $1,000 for a small little project at a boat yard. So I
Yeah.
figured I just try. I'm not afraid to try things, even
Yeah.
if they mess up. And then now I'm at the point where like I'm really not afraid to try things because I know I can fix it. If I do mess up.
Uh-huh.
And I'm a little overwhelmed now because I've got the boat in the front yard out here, and I need to do a lot. Like one thing's not too bad. Like if it's just I can watch some videos and learn it. But now I've got like lots and lots of projects that I've never done before.
Yeah.
Uh, so the nice thing about posting the videos is people if they know what they're doing or if they don't, they will let you know. Like so
Yeah.
you get a lot of good advice, but you get a lot of really bad advice too.
Yeah.
But you do get advice, so you don't get stuck. You say, okay, well, could I try that, or maybe I should think twice before, for doing that. So I get a little bit more help than I used to because I do the videos.
Yeah.
But like, it's if you just I just try things, you mess up less and less as you go. Like I'm almost every project I did in my first boat was like a failure, and then it was like maybe like half the projects I did failed and half of them didn't. I kind of just enjoy kind of messing around with it. Like I think you saw my Hawaii video,
Yeah.
the solar panel arch, the way I built it
Yeah.
at first, just because
Yeah.
the boat was constantly rocking. I bent the tubing at too tight of a radius. I just
Uh-huh.
had this little shop I used, and they had a certain size die to bend tubing, and I
Right.
used that. But I think they usually use a much bigger radius, and it had like a tiny little kink in it, and then just the constant little flexing of the hull and the boat. It put that stress on the tubing, and then it snapped. And one day
Yeah.
my solar panels just all fell down. And
Oh.
luckily it was a calm day, and I was just bored out of my mind, and I was like, okay, project to do. Get out the saw, and I fixed it up, and it turned out to be better than it started,
Huh.
even just with the tools I had on my boat.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing, it's like just give it a try. And I mean, I guess it could have been a lot worse, but usually you can sort out a solution, and then you have the skills next time to do it a little better. So this time, hopefully my solar arch will be a little more
Yeah.
sturdy.
Oh, that's really it's kind of like the boat anchor thing where once you just kind of go through things one or two times, you just have like a level of familiarity with it that you can
Hmm.
apply to the next, whatever. If you're doing aluminum for some other reason, you already probably know a lot more than you did when you built that first arch. Or maybe it
Yeah,
was
now I'm
steel.
looking
Maybe
at types
what?
of aluminum or
Yeah.
annealing and wall thickness. It's like, oh, can I put a bend in this metal?
Yeah.
On along the same line, I tried to build it's called a Dodger. It's a little like a metal frame that holds a canvas and goes over the front of the boat.
Okay.
And I just bought aluminum online, or I had, yeah, and I brought it to the shop and I tried to bend it on then it snapped, and I tried to bend it again and it snapped. I was like, oh, there's certain different, grades of aluminum and thicknesses that can be bent better
Oh,
than others, and ways of heating it and stuff. So yeah, learning
wow.
about that.
Can you tell us about your kind of goals for the future in terms of where you're heading? The sailing to Hawaii seems like a lifetime achievement sailing project, so accomplishment. So where do you go from here? Do you have another list of big trips that you are kind of putting out on your calendar, or what's in the future for you?
Yeah, so I didn't want to sail over the winter, so I pulled my boat out and I'm in North Carolina now. And I just was like kind of browsing through Craigslist and I found this workshop. I wasn't really planning on buying a property. But it was pretty cheap. I was like, oh, it'd be great to have like a place where I could put my boat and a home base. So I'm using it as a storage unit and a workshop, and I'm just fixing my boat up. And then around maybe probably late May, early June, uh, I'm planning to cross the Atlantic on my Cape Dory 28, the boat I just sailed up and down the East Coast. Um, and from there, I don't know, just kind of play it by ear. So probably kind of cruise around Europe and stuff, and then maybe sail it back. I'd love to do a circumnavigation, maybe in this boat, maybe another one. Don't really know. Just kind of
Huh.
playing it trip by trip. But the Atlantic crossing is my next big goal. I just want to be at sea for a few weeks at it, at one big stretch. I think that'd be fun.
Well, you've done it before, so is there when people do a circumnavigation, is there like one general direction that everybody travels that's the most favorable with winds and such? In other words, are you going the wrong direction to just continue if you get to Europe and decide to keep going to do, around the world, or how does that work?
Yeah, so if you go the trade winds, you usually go east to west. So going across the Atlantic, I'd be going kind of the opposite way. So I'd
Yeah.
probably end up kind of going through northern Europe and then maybe working my way down the Mediterranean, maybe into Africa a little bit, and then I'd probably cross back over to maybe like the Caribbean. And then if I wanted to continue circumnavigation, I'd probably go up through the Panama
Yeah.
Canal, and then since I've already done Hawaii, I'd probably go down to the South Pacific and kind of continue to go around the it's called the trade wind route. So you could do
Yeah.
more. You're probably going more downwind than upwind, and it's
Yeah.
also and then that's kind of opposite to the Southern Ocean approach, where you'd be going the other way, west to east, and that would be a
Right.
much stronger wind. Like if you're going try to do a record or tempt or something, usually you kind of circle
Oh,
kind of around
I see.
Antarctica.
Oh man, well, I hope you do it. And that just sounds adventure is the word, because all of these places you just rattled off, obviously Europe and the Mediterranean, but then going down down to the Panama Canal and the South Pacific, it really is like the call of adventure. So while you're on the boat for weeks at a time, are you reading, or are you kind of working on, I don't know, what takes the times when you're bored, or what do you
Mm.
fill like the gaps with? I know you're not bored, like there's nothing to do because you're sailing the whole time, but do you get to read much? If so, what do you read, or what are you kind of doing on those weeks at a time at sea?
Yeah, I read books. I got a Kindle, so I can put a lot of books on there.
There you
And that
go.
was one of the things when I sailed to Hawaii. I kind of was more still focused on getting the boat ready to go. I just kind of downloaded a bunch of books as I was as I was still sailing out and still had cell signal. And I kind of ran out. I didn't realize how much you can really get through a book when you just have that amount of time.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'll download videos, lots of music. I also had whatever I had on my Spotify downloaded list. It
Uh-huh.
was like I ran through those songs and got so tired of them because it was just the same ones over and over. Of course, you don't have cell signal when you're that far out. I did have a lot of podcasts kind of backlogged, so that's a good thing to do. But then again, yeah, so preparing everything takes a lot longer out there, like preparing a meal, just because every little movement you do, you kind of have to brace yourself on a
Uh-huh.
small boat.
Yeah.
So just moving from one side of the boat to the other takes a long time. Like fishing, for example, I get a lot of flack for not fishing enough.
Yeah.
But
What the
a lot of
heck?
times on a shorter passage, it's just like you're always a little have a kind of a malaise of like maybe not quite always seasickness, but
Huh.
it's kind of like a drowsiness, and it's kind of hard to motivate me to do more than the bare minimum to keep the boat sailing.
Yeah.
It's usually maybe after 5 or 6 days you get to a point where like okay you could start reading more books and being a little more productive working on boat projects.
Yeah.
And I did fish a little bit, but I don't know. I think I haven't caught a lot in the past, and that doesn't motivate me to keep trying in the future. So it's like a catch-22. I don't catch stuff because I don't
Mhm.
fish, and I don't fish because I don't catch stuff. But I'll try
Yeah.
to do more. I have some fishing gear. Trolling when you're sailing, you're kind of going at a constant speed, so it's actually a pretty good speed for trolling. but you're not like necessarily seeking out maybe a spot where like when you're dropping the line, you kind of find a good spot where you can consecutively catch up fish. So it's not always exciting. But I do see these other videos and people just pull up fish every passage. So maybe I need to be working harder on that.
Yeah, I bet you. It sounds easy. Why aren't you fishing? But it's not easy between setting it up and rigging and maintaining the bait. And then if you catch something, now you're like cooking and
I don't want to
cleaning
catch
and
something so big, and I also
right.
can't because there's some big fish out there. I've seen them like
Yes.
jumping.
Yeah.
Don't want. I have my line kind of set, so I shouldn't. It'll break before I catch something huge. But yeah, reeling it in that can take a time. I can heave the boat too, kind of slow it down a little bit, but trying to. As long as you got your hands full, just keeping your boat
Right.
steering itself and the sails. Winds over a certain speed, you kind of don't want to be crawling around the cockpit unnecessarily.
Right. If you had
so there's
two
only like certain
people,
conditions I want to fish in.
yeah, if you had someone with you, I could see where fishing would be like a really great thing because you can kind of pass it back and forth, and that would make probably a lot more sense. Who knows? Maybe you'll crack the code and start posting videos with fish.
Plus, like scaling a fish, or even flaying it, like if you get a bigger one, it's like that's messy, and you got a knife, and it takes like I've done it before on my boat, and it's just like the entire cockpit's full of blood. Because I don't really know what I'm doing that much, but it's a big hassle. I would catch the flying fish, and I just scale them and have them for breakfast. Descale them and have them for breakfast. Those are pretty good, but it's kind of a project. They're delicious though. I love eating some fresh fish.
Do you find that you're just like hungry though? Like when I'm home, I don't know. I'm just like eating constantly. It's like habit, It's probably just. Anyways, when you're on a boat, obviously your food is pretty planned out and setting up.
And it's setting them right in front of you too.
It's like
you're
it's
in
like
a confined space with all your food. I would go through all the good stuff right away. So I'm gonna make that my new goal. So on my Hawaii passage, I ate all my candy in the first week or something. Like every time I would like do something, like have to go out in the cold and like change the state, I was like, okay, I deserve a treat because I like candy. So I'm gonna like pace myself more and like have like Ziploc bags and be like, this is for day number 5, day number 10. So I need some way to ration it or maybe just hide it. Because that was the other thing, like stuff would like fall in the cracks. And then like that was saved, and like when I got really hungry, like towards the end of the passage, I'd like
rooting through everything.
I found this thing. I'd run out of anything sweet, and I found this package of like dried mango or something. Oh my gosh, I was so happy.
Yeah.
I think I was only living on like canned soup and pasta at that point.
Well, what you need to do is just bring like 6 times as much candy as on the next trip, so there's more in general, or whatever the food is, beef jerky and all sunflower seeds, and
to go through huge amounts of candy though.
Yeah, well, that's just too cool. Well, Sam, this is really fun. I owned a sailboat a long time ago that I had on the lake for a few years, and it was just barely enough to kind of understand how satisfying it must be to accomplish a goal like what you did in sailing to Hawaii by yourself in a small boat and everything you've done since. It's really inspiring, and I gotta I don't know, cheer you on. I don't know if you plan on doing this for years and decades, or you kind of just gonna see what happens, or maybe we can end this by what are your long-term goals? You have you quit your job, so I guess you don't have that holding you back. But where do you see like the future for you?
I don't really know. I mean, I did go back at one point to my job for like a contract, and that worked pretty well because I was able to work for a little bit and sail sail right afterwards. But the YouTube thing, the top end is really, really wide open. To see these YouTube channels making $1 million a year, and like anything in between, right? So like, you could be it'd be fun to see if I could grow it bigger, or I mean, if it doesn't, that's fine too. It's kind of just fun to. I mean, I'm not doing the sailing to make the YouTube videos. I'm sailing because I want to. So but I get a lot of support, through it now too. So it doesn't really take a lot of time for me to take out my camera since it's just on my phone. So I don't know if I'll keep doing it or not. We'll see.
Yeah, it's almost like fishing. I was gonna say fishing adds like another aspect to sailing, but so does filming videos. And between now filming videos as you sail, that definitely fills in any extra cracks and time of your trip. Even just planning out the content, I'm sure.
It gives me a fun way to look at things too, like something I wouldn't necessarily have looked twice at. Now it's like, oh, how can I film this? This group of dolphins. Which I mean, I see so many dolphins, doesn't mean anything to me, but it's like it's kind of a new. Oh, let's try to
Yes.
get some footage of that. And I always thought, oh, I don't want to be looking at the world through my camera, but
Yeah.
it kind of adds something at a certain point when it just kind of becomes the same.
Yeah. Well, I love YouTube. I love seeing things that you would never have a chance to see otherwise, and there's lots of examples of this. It could be like what we do, like work and equipment and whatever, but also sailing and people who are mountaineering or rock climbing. You get to kind of see things that you just otherwise wouldn't see. So I think it's really valuable and cool. And I hope you keep on, I don't know, I guess we'll see what happens, but keep at it. And I can't thank you enough for coming on. I will link to your channel and Instagram for our audience, but is there anywhere besides your YouTube channel or Instagram that we should direct people if they want to see some of these things we're talking about?
Nope, just Sam Holmes Sailing on YouTube or Instagram. That's it.
All right, Sam. Well, thanks again. Have a good winter and best of luck on your Atlantic crossing. And that's in the summer. Is that right? May, you said?
Yeah, around then.
All right. Well, be safe, and we'll catch up with you at some point after that's behind you.
You bet. Take care.